Welcome back. Today I wanted to talk about the issue of how to fix your life. Now, how presumptuous of me as a 22-year-old to think that I have anything worthwhile to say on this matter. And I want to sort of acknowledge my own immaturity, my ignorance from the outset, and really say that, don't expect this 10 15 minute video to give you all the answers, to give you the criteria. I can only really offer the sort of insights and experience that I've managed to acquire in my short life so far. But I do think I do have confidence in some of the merits of what I have to say, because I have seen some things. I've been in many different places mentally within this life, both good and bad, and I think you do learn and acquire certain lessons, certain understandings through that experience. And part of the benefit of having a thing like a podcast, like a channel, is that I can sort of articulate and share those understandings with other people to hopefully inspire within themselves certain thoughts and reflections, certain insights. This is how we get things moving. And this question of how to fix your life is, is something that we want to have a consistent grasp on throughout our life, because everyone is prone towards falling into depressive cycles, towards into rough patches. These are very natural and normal things to encounter, and they're often, I would say, periods of very profound growth. And this may come as a surprise for me to talk about these sorts of difficult things in life in a more of a positive spin and more of a positive reframing. But it's to put it a different way, it's like these periods, these difficult periods, are extremely uncomfortable, and it's through that discomfort where they force you to really confront and engage with certain aspects of your life that you want to change, that are in a state of disarray. And it's these things which prompt you towards feeling bad, towards feeling uneasy, towards feeling like something is wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on it. And if you think about what depression, what anxiety, what these negative feelings are, fundamentally it's that they're emotional signals, they're emotional pointers. And sometimes we can choose to ignore them and try and push it away and sort of lose ourselves within some kind of distraction, some kind of addictive pattern, in order to sort of avoid confronting these sorts of thoughts. But it doesn't get rid of them. It often leads to them just sort of bubbling along, and they sort of reach a certain tension point, this kind of crescendo where you have a proper meltdown. And yeah, so I guess sort of that's one of the reasons why it's perhaps not useful to really repress these sort of feelings. It's important to confront them in a sort of controlled and manageable way, such that you can then eventually integrate them and try and sort of uncover, what is the cause, what's the underbelly of these feelings. Because very rarely do they just come out the blue. Very rarely are you just sad for no reason. Maybe you can't think of a reason within that very moment. And yeah, this is certainly the case. Sometimes you can just be sad for no apparent reason, and you can have a sort of an absurd kind of confusion to that. But I think you can, with time, sort of try and sort of explore it, introspect into thinking, well, what is the reason for this? Did I not get enough sleep today? Did someone say something nasty to me earlier on, or whatever? Did I, has my diet not been good for weeks or whatever? There's a vast multitude of different sorts of explanations, different descriptions that we can sort of spring up to try and explain our sort of emotional life. And there's always going to be more sort of explanations. You can always refer to people's traumatic experiences as, whether in childhood, adolescence, adulthood, as the reason for why they have this sort of a certain emotional model of the world. And trauma is certainly a significant thing to pay attention and to sort of look into if you're trying to understand your emotional life, because we all carry it to certain degrees. I mean, it's a very normal thing for an organism to have, to go through certain traumatic experiences. Um, friction is a part of how we grow, but friction occurs in spectrums, and you can have excessive friction, excessive difficulty, excessive trauma, which really does cripple one's ability to have a stable emotional life. If you think about childhood trauma, for example, which is often the most pernicious and damaging forms of trauma, because it happens very early in an organism's life, in a human's life, to use a human example. Because in childhood we're very unmolded, we're unconditioned, we haven't confronted all the obligations, responsibilities, the chaos of life. We're nakedly walking into it. And part of this sort of naked confrontation with life is that we have to develop models, develop certain schematics of navigating the world and understanding what's going on. And the terrible thing about childhood trauma is that the lessons, the early data for the child to model on, is the presentation of a world filled with stress and fear and terrible things. So as a result of that, the model that the child builds from an early age is one of a world that is inherently unsafe. And that's perhaps one of the worst lessons that you could give to a child, because it totally hinders their ability to play. It hinders their ability to really explore the world. It shrinks their consciousness. Um, just in a way which is difficult to really get them out of. You know, and that's not to say that childhood trauma is something that cannot be resolved to a certain degree, but it is certainly the one of the more severe types of trauma. So I think that to come back to this question of like, how do you fix your life? Part of that fixing is trying to uncover the sort of the traumas, the repressed feelings, the 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 sort of emotional models that you have currently, that are currently your current sort of frames for looking out into the world and understanding the world. You've got to first try and understand the way you're looking at the world, because of course the way we look at the world often dictates what we see in the world. If we see the world in terms of threat and danger, we will only ever see threats and danger. If we see the world in terms of play and exploration, we will only ever see opportunities for play and opportunities for exploration. So, part of the way of fixing your life is seeing, how do you currently view life? What are your current models for engaging with reality? And are they models that are conducive to your flourishing? Do they enable you to really engage in life with a nice flow, with a nice sense of play, a sense of exploration, or do they put you in a state of fear and anxiety about the world that makes you edgy, that contracts your consciousness, and really hinders your ability to have a sense of emotional well-being? And that's the first step. The first step is confronting those ways of seeing. And the second step, of course, is how do you go about fixing them? How do you go about sort of um, putting in the efforts to create sort of change in the way you see the world? And this is a whole different topic that I've talked about lots on my sort of channel. You know, a significant part of it is, of course, mindfulness. Is of course um, really sort of elucidating in your consciousness these sort of patterns, giving them space, and sort of. Sorry, I'm thinking about the best way to sort of. I think that mindfulness is one component of it, but I think particularly in the case of depression, which is often a very cognitive thing, that is often and it's often related to our thoughts and our thought patterns. Um, it's very difficult to really think your way out of depression because your thought is almost inherently kind of, you know, toxic in a certain way. Like, in depression, your way of seeing is inherently one that is just grey and gloomy. Everything is just, your way of seeing sort of precludes your ability to ever think good thoughts, ever think optimistic things about the world. So I think that, particularly in when your problems are these sort of disorders of thought, fundamentally, thinking your way out of it is not the right. It's not the right way to address it, and consequently, like mindfulness in such cases, it's useful to a certain extent in order to sort of bring out those thought patterns, to bring them to your awareness, and then to assess the the usefulness of them. But then again, bringing it to your awareness isn't going to eliminate it. It just brings it to your awareness. It brings it to your foreground. And so what do we do then if we have an awareness of our negative patterns, of our negative thought models? What do we do then after that when we bring it to our consciousness? And I think this brings in the importance of action, of actually doing stuff. And we should think that we want to if we want to engage seriously and meaningfully in the world, we need to be mindful of our thoughts, but fundamentally we should be tying our thoughts to action, because action's what actually gets us to do stuff in the world. It gets us to speak. I'm doing the action of talking right now, which is a cooperation of my thought and my action. And I don't know where this sort of I had this quote recently about how the cure to depression is action. I don't know who it's come from, and I think it's very important because it's action is a way of sidestepping the the thought disorder of depression. And depression, it very much is a feeling of being stuck in our heads, of feeling paralyzed by thoughts, and our thought paralyzes us so that we can't really act in the world, or acting just feels meaningless and just pointless. But against this sort of meaningless, we still feel. I'm just sort of thinking because I don't know the answers. I'm trying to think of how to. I mean, there's a problem when I talk in these sort of riffy sort of videos. There will probably be pauses, which I leave in there because it's I think it just gives it more of an organic sort of style, and also maybe I'm too lazy to edit, but it's to sort of have some sort of few sort of concluding and clarifying sort of thoughts. Yeah, how do you do action when your thought is telling you that action is pointless, or when thought is not necessarily joined with action in a meaningful way? And I don't know the full. I don't really know what answer I could give to that. You know, but I do feel that even when acting does feel meaningless, you know, does that mean that non-action has more meaning? Does that mean make non-action the optimal solution when you have no reason to act? I mean, I can understand when you feel tired physiologically and you have no energy, then action just it doesn't seem like a an opportunity that's afforded to you in that case. But yeah, I think that. Hmm. One thing to sort of think about is how are we sort of coordinating our sort of nervous system energies, because our thoughts are obviously sort of movements of energy in a certain dimension of our experience, and our physical actions are another movement of our finite energy, and we only have so much energy. Hence why we have to sleep in order to recalibrate, restore everything. I guess that as well sort of ties into the importance of sleep, the importance of rest, in order to give you those recovery periods such that you can then have the energy to actually act in the world and actually think positively. You know, very often sort of mental disorders are often coupled with disorders of sleep, and sleep is so important for our physical and mental health. It's one of the fundamental pillars, I'd say, and joined to that as well, nutrition. Nutrition is the foods that you're eating. Do they nourish you or are they poisoning you? That's something that you need to think about. And genuine social connection as well. I think that it's especially with depression, which is becoming more and more prevalent in our society. When you look at sort of what aspects in our society are driving that, the issues with nutrition, which is obvious. Um, with processed food, with fast food, we treat food as a commodity rather than a sacred kind of thing. And then no wonder we have people with metabolic disorders, which then lead into certain mental disorders. When you look at sleep, many of us have disrupted circadian rhythms from our phones, from city skylights and all the light that is you know taking us away obviously from our ancestral past, where we were much more attuned to the rhythms of the earth. You know, when we have disorders of sleep, that leads to disorders to lots of other things. And as well, talking about this community point, we are much more isolated, much more lonelier than we've ever been. Partially through this digital revolution, we're so much more caught up within our personalized social media feeds, such we don't really have a need to engage seriously with the outside world. But being the sort of social and tribal animals that we are, this makes things very weird. It gives us a very weird modern environment that is mismatched with the sort of environment that we are evolutionarily used to. So I guess this sort of adds some sort of these sort of 3 points add some sort of environmental kind of context to the ways in which our environment currently is perhaps not conducive towards really um, creating psychological flourishing. And when you think about that, it it displaces the blame of people's mental issues from them as a person, from them as an individual, which is sometimes a trap that people can fall into, where they feel like I'm responsible for my depression, I'm responsible for my anxiety, and sometimes it can be equally framed as a reasonable and adaptive response to a sick world, a sick world outside of themselves. But then, like, you know, how do you heal a sick world? You know, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's a difficult topic to really say anything conclusive on because I guess we're all still working it out. And, you know, as evidenced by my pauses and me having to stop for thoughts, um, this isn't something that I've figured out at all. You know, there's just something I'm thinking through. And I guess I like to sort of show that incompleteness with the incompleteness of these sort of productions um, as a sort of an act of authenticity, I suppose, as a sort of humility with regards to sort of not having the answers. You know, because everyone wants certainty, but sometimes certainty isn't afforded to us by reality, and we have to sit with that ambiguity and sit with that uncomfortableness of not knowing. But we have to confront it. It's pointless avoiding it. But yeah, that's been somewhat insightful. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure you like and subscribe and do all that typical stuff. It helps me out. It helps the algorithm gods or whatever filtering whether people see any of this sort of stuff. So yeah, if you find this useful, you want other people to see it, then yeah, you know, it helps me out. So, anyways, good day.